Welcome to Better Health Guy Blogcasts, empowering your better health. And now, here's Scott, your Better Health Guy. The content of this show is for informational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any illness or medical condition. Nothing in today's discussion is meant to serve as medical advice or as information to facilitate self-treatment. As always, please discuss any potential health-related decisions with your own personal medical authority.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 220 of the Better Health Guy blogcast series. Today's guest is Todd Shipman, and the topic of the show is harnessing quantum energy to transform health. Todd Shipman is a wellness enthusiast, entrepreneur, and advocate for cutting-edge quantum technologies that enhance health and well-being. With a background in anti-aging, physical performance, water revitalization, and holistic living, Todd's passion lies in helping people unlock their optimal wellness potential by connecting with nature-inspired solutions. Todds Journey has brought him to the forefront of innovative products like those from Leela Quantum Tech, a company revolutionizing energy healing through quantum charge tools and EMF-neutralizing technologies. From wearable quantum devices to solutions for homes and bodies, Todd is dedicated to sharing the transformative power of quantum energy with the world. And now my interview with Todd Shipman. Today, we're going to talk about quantum energy and the quantum field and how to use quantum physics as part of a health optimization strategy. We have with us today Todd Shipman, who's well known in the biohacking world as a biohacker turned healer. Todd collaborates with some of the most forward-thinking companies in the healing space and works to educate people on Leela Quantum and how to use quantum energy to support and optimize the human body. Thanks so much for being here today, Todd.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Scott.
So tell us a little bit about how you were drawn into the health and biohacking arenas. Did you have your own personal healing journey that gave you the passion for the work that you do today? What drives your focus on really helping other people to heal and optimize their health and wellness?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question to start everything off with. And honestly, I've been very lucky. My entire life, I've really never had any health issues per se that have created any form of disruption in my life. That being said, though, I have experience with my mother who dealt with autoimmune diseases her whole life, fibromyalgia, rheumatoid arthritis, sarcoidosis, everything you could think of. And just being in the sidelines, because not that I was active in the healing part of that at all. I just saw it and witnessed it and saw how much it was just deteriorating her quality of life. I really got into this, though, was because I was a competitive ultra runner. So I used to run like the 100 to 200 mile ultra marathons. And I would do that, like looking back now, I was really, I was doing it the hard way. I didn't have any awareness of my diet. I didn't have any awareness of effective stuff. I'd go out and as a training run, I'd go run for 12 hours, just to do a training run for 100 miler instead of learning, nowadays, all the things we have to, minimal effort, maximum results. I wish I kind of had that focus back then. And honestly, one time I finished running a 100 miler. It was the Western States 100 miler, which is considered like the Boston Marathon of 100 milers. They had this, basically at that time, it was a portable cryo machine. And I had no idea what it was. But usually after 100 milers, you can't walk for 2 or 3 days. You're shuffling because everything hurts, everything's so sore and all that. And, they blasted my hips, my calves and hamstrings with this little localized cryo machine. And the next day I could walk. And it's really funny to look back because, this was not crazy long ago. It was 15, 17 years ago, but that blew my mind because I didn't know things like that were possible or available. So at that point, it's like, well, what's next? Like, what else is there that's available? And I just started digging and finding all these cool things that I could utilize to make my life and my passions and sport like that more effective. And then from there, it's just always, I'm an extremist in many things. So it just that opened up a whole new journey of alternative health. And then also the focus, specifically with my mom, because, my mom, she gets told all these things and they're really high level words. There's all these studies and she didn't understand it. So I really learned there's this niche of a bridge between being able to understand the science, which I was, but then if you go over someone's head, you've lost them, so it's how do we explain these things so that my now 73-year-old mom can understand it, or my youngest kids that are 12 years old understand it. And that's what's kind of kept me going, because I see that there are a lot of really smart people out there with really cool products and really cool research. But what's the gap is the ability to communicate that information to people who just don't, aren't in that area of expertise and understand all the words that are in these studies.
So I know you work very closely with the team at Leela Quantum, including the founder and CEO, Philip Seymour von Holzendorf-Feeling. That's a mouthful, of course. His background really originally coming from more the communications industry, where many of us in the chronic illness community think of EMFs as potentially detrimental. And then he kind of moved into more energy and frequency as tools for healing, really seeming somewhat polar opposites. And as I understand, his wife had her own journey with chronic Lyme disease that was one of the catalysts for the creation of Leela Quantum and for the work that Philip does as well. So wondering if you can tell us a little about why Philip does what he does today and how quantum energy was a core part of his personal journey, his family's journey, and now his client's journey.
So Philip was the global vice president of T-Mobile for a very long time. And, which I can appreciate about him is he's been on both ends of the spectrum in a way. And like, he'll always say, it's like, listen, when I was on that end, we're definitely not conspiring to how to, create a dangerous world for people, because there's a lot of ignorance of what's going on and what they're told and the studies that they're presented with, and he just got to see the other side. And always kind of blankets with that. It's like, hey, listen, like we weren't out there to like cause harm with people. So, but one thing I really appreciate about him, then I'll go on a little further, is just like his awareness to, instead of, because of course you can block EMFs, right? You can use Faraday cages and all that. But like for his focus, considering how long it was in the communications world, is to how do we work synergistically with everything? How do we live in harmony with the nice luxuries and higher technologies that we have? And that's kind of where his focus is with Leela Quantum, especially with the infused or, the charged quantum energy. But we also do have EMF blocking clothing and stuff. So his wife was his crew, and she had terrible, like, bedridden Lyme disease. And just like a lot of us, at some point you start to figure out that the most common form of healthcare just doesn't cut it. And they started looking for everything alternative and what things that they were doing. And they were researching different people in Europe, and they came across a bunch of different types of healers that could work with them. And some of those have actually grown to continue working with Leela Quantum. But like at the time, they were being utilized as people Philip had and crew had met and connected with help her kind of reverse her Lyme symptoms. And that we can kind of go into at some point, like what is quantum energy and what are the benefits, because that's where I think really for crew, she experienced the benefits was from like the neutralization and that stuff. So if we want to go into that at some point, we can too.
It's actually a really good segue. So my next question is, what is quantum energy for people that have never heard of it? Is it somehow similar to what we might refer to as vibration or vitality? Maybe let's talk a little bit about where does it come from? Where does it live or exist? Is it outside of us? Is it inside of us? Is it inherently good, or can it be both good and bad? Is it neutralizing? Is it balancing, harmonizing? So many things that we can talk about with quantum energy, but how does accessing quantum energy then support the optimization and health of the human body?
Yeah, and let's just step back for a moment too, because I know most of the time the word quantum creates a kind of step back response. There's a lot of unethical marketing and dilution that we'll see as we're scrolling through social media or something, where we see these quantum patches that block EMFs and quantum this and that. And it's really a word that I have issues with for the majority of things, because, especially in this alternative and health and wellness world, people are very desperate to feel better. So they'll cling on to things easier. So that's where I think people take advantage of it. And what we're working with here is more so focused on like quantum physics. There's quantum mechanics, quantum computing, quantum biology. There's a whole bunch of different ways to utilize the word, but a lot of stuff out there. So I understand the stigma of quantum. And that's actually how I got into quantum, was to prove it was a scam 10 plus years ago. But like quantum energy it's basically like the subatomic level of energy. So it's the energy behind the matter at a subatomic level. It's kind of the foundational force that's in all matter. So, and kind of like you were saying, positive, negative, it's neither, it's neutral. So you're not going to get a positive energy. You're not getting negative energy. You just have this like resonance neutralization. And that's where a lot of the benefits come in, because it is neutralizing anything that is coming into that space and coming into contact with it, which, for example, like EMFs, it allows like healing by calming the nervous system, harmonizing our biofield.
So is it essentially the same energy that we talk about that maybe people tap into with meditation or the chi masters or monks? And then if people are trying to kind of visualize, where does quantum energy live? Is there a place from which we're then sourcing quantum energy with some of the tools that we're going to talk about from Leela Quantum?
So quantum energy is actually everywhere. It's kind of like, if you think about like the ether, like it is everything around us. And one thing Philip and crew always say is you technically don't need the Leela Q products. It's just that most people don't have the ability to tap in or access the quantum energy, even though it is always there, whether it's because we are just not as present, we're disconnected from day-to-day life things. So that's always one thing is you talk about the Leela products will present the quantum to you, but it's also just always out here. It's not something we invented or created. It's been there since the existence of time. And then, yeah, I mean, it's not so much that I would say it's something that like the chi, like, because it's different than your aura or your life force energy. This is just quantum energy, and it's in a space, but it's at the bottom of everything. So it's not like life force energy where it's more like less subtle. It's passive. So I wouldn't say they're the same, because people always wonder, like, is quantum the same as scalar? I think scalar is a subcategory of it, but it's kind of like from what the Mick and Morty, like all fleebs are blots, but not all bots are fleebs. That's a weird analogy, but a lot of people ask the question, like, is quantum energy like scalar? And it's easier to say no.
So let's come back then to the conversation around people's skepticism. How do you educate a quantum energy skeptic? I know you mentioned you were skeptical at the start of your exploration into this realm, that you wanted to really disprove it. So what was it that shifted you from trying to disprove it to having an aha moment where you went, maybe there is something here, and you went from a skeptic to a believer?
Yeah, I have a lot of understanding and a lot of patience isn't the right word, because I don't need patience, but I just have I'm very open to skepticism. How about that when it comes to quantum? Because I totally get it. I understand it. It doesn't bother me, and I welcome it. Just like with anything in this, especially in the health and wellness, like skepticism, it's trust but verify. And I got into it in about 2014, maybe 2015, where now this wasn't Leela Quantum at first. It was a different company. And I was like, this quantum is a scam, and I'm going to be the superhero here and put myself on the line and show everyone that this is a scam. So what I did, now granted, this isn't like clinical trial, but it's what I did. And it was enough for me to have a major shift. So I'm a monotonous eater. I can eat the same meal every day, all day as I'm completely happy. So what I had done was basically, I started with, I think, about 30 days of eating the same food. And I went and got a Spectre cell micronutrient blood test. And it showed at the time that I was deficient in probably like 6 or 7 different micronutrients. And what I started doing is wearing this necklace that had all the micronutrient frequencies encased into it. So I wore that, for which the creator of it told me to wear it for 40 days and then get a blood test again. So I did that. And I got, these tests aren't, back then they were like $600. After 40 days, I got that test again after wearing the necklace, and everything was optimal according to the test. And nothing was over, nothing was under, everything was stayed in the optimal range. That is also because, again, when you have these frequencies, they're available to you. So you're not forcing these frequencies of nutrients onto you. So I'm not going to have a toxic level of, vitamin A or D. It's just always there in case your body needs it. That is presented kind of into the biofield for your body to use. So I did that same test for 3 different times, wearing the necklace. All the times it stayed optimal. And then I stopped wearing the necklace. And this whole time I'm eating the same meals every day. And when I stopped wearing the necklace, and then the 40 days after that, I got tested again, and I was deficient in the same nutrients that I was as I started. And that for me was okay, there's something to this. Again, that's not hardcore crazy science in a lab, but it was enough for me to know that there was definitely something to it.
I mean, it's interesting because my primary mentor is Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt, and he's talked about, even with his system of energetic testing, autonomic response testing, that he can go through and find that maybe somebody needs 15 different supplements or nutrients, but then if he lasers them into the person's field and then goes back and retests them, that it's a fairly small percentage of the original items that the body still seems to want, that there are some things that maybe we do physically need, but that a lot of the things we think we need to take, that it really is more the frequency that the body needs, not necessarily the physical substance. And that sounds very much what like your experience was as well.
Yeah, it's like information. And, my friend Ian Mitchell always say, because it's not also similar to that, right? It's like at some point you also need the physical substance. If we were all like extreme enlightened beings, then yeah, we wouldn't need food. We wouldn't need water. We could base everything off our own energy, but we're not. So
So one of the things that I understand about Leela Quantum is that there's a group of, and you mentioned this a little bit, a group of well-known healers that you all collaborate with. So talk to us a little bit about these healers that are involved in kind of the Leela process. How are they involved in the creation of some of the technologies that you make available? Is it that they're coming up with certain frequencies that are then incorporated into your products? And maybe then just kind of talk to us a little bit about the role of the healers in the work that you're doing in the quantum energy realm.
they're pretty much, it's a group of different people, experts in what they're doing with the energy work. If you go through their stories, like Roman Hefner, they call him the Wonder Kid. When he was a little kid, they'd have him at conferences and he could tell people on stage what's wrong with them because he sees things in energy and vibrations, everything, and auras. But he can look at you, and I've worked with him myself for other reasons, and he can just look at you and tell you where your vibrations or what's going on with your body. So it's really fascinating. He's just one of them. He's the only one that I've ever worked with personally. But that being said, what their main thing is creating like the frequencies. So they're the ones that work on the blends, the frequencies, and developing them for the Leela products. They're not really involved with much anything else besides like product creations when it comes to the frequency imprints.
We're going to get into some of the research, which is really cool that you all have done, but maybe at a high level, just talk to us a little bit about some of the specific biological changes that quantum energy and the work with Leela Quantum could potentially lead to in the body.
Yeah. One thing is, again, we didn't invent the quantum energy. And what's really cool and I really appreciate about with what Philip is doing is that we also, kind of like how Wim Hof did a lot of his breathing, but he never claimed to understand the how or the why. It's also with Philip, like with quantum energy, is like we understand that it does these things, but we're also aware that there are probably many other things that we're still not aware of what it does. We're just finding these things out because at this point there's like 65, not all of them are double-blind placebo-controlled, but the majority of them are double-blind placebo-controlled studies. And we're constantly looking for new ways and finding new ways that people can benefit from quantum energy. One thing I'll say with all these studies, where I believe the actual basis of the benefits are happening is because the quantum energy literally is neutralizing everything. So it's putting us into our own natural state, because it's like bubble wrapping ourselves from all these environmental external stressors. So Scott, you and I go spend a week in Yosemite, no phones, nothing. We're just camping, right? Like there's nothing that's really stressing us, and our body can start to function the way it was meant to, its natural state. And that's where I believe a lot of these, even though we're seeing these benefits, it's not even so much, hey, quantum energy did this for you. It's because the quantum energy put this, in the best way to say it, a protective bubble so your body can do what it was naturally meant to do. So it's not the dosage of quantum energy that is creating the benefits like I'll talk about, but the things we're seeing is like we see an increase of heart rate variability. We just did a really cool study on the brain, which I'll go back to in a second because I don't want to veer off too far, but we saw a 7% increase in heart rate variability instantly. We see an increase in white blood cell count or production of that. We have up to a 29% production in ATP. We are seeing decrease in like blood clotting. And of course, I'm sure your audience knows, but I always want to make sure what we say that when we talk about blood clotting, we're not talking about like things that like you could die from. It's just like makes your blood way less sticky. And we're seeing like expedition of wound healing by like 100 to 200%. And again, that's where I just want to step back and talk about like, I believe like you're having the wound healing because your body can focus on healing the wound. It doesn't have to like also spend some of its energy, suppressing EMF stress or anything else that's in your area. So I think like when we're talking about all these benefits, it's really also where I would say we'd almost find similar results again if you and I were out camping with nothing around us for a week in a national park. Like we too would have like better ATP production, and our beta and our gamma brainwave lengths would be more lower than, and our alpha and theta would be higher, just naturally, because we don't have all this stress going on.
So I think that's a really great way to think about this. It's not how I had thought about it, but it makes a lot of sense, because I think for those of us that are dealing with more significant chronic health challenges, like I did with chronic Lyme disease and mold illness and all these other things that kind of come along with it, I think that the environment is the primary driver. All of the frequencies, all of the other environmental toxicants, the metals, the pesticides, the chemicals, all of these things that are coming from outside that then are influencing our health in a negative way. And what you're saying is that we can then harness the power of quantum energy to mitigate all of those negative external influences.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like bubble wrapping yourself around all these things in a protective state.
So one of the things that I've occasionally seen is, let's say you take a Faraday cage with the silver lined cloth around the bed location, and somebody then starts to sleep in there. They now don't have the external EMF influence, and they actually can get worse because the body starts to detoxify, where now they're in more of a parasympathetic state. Their cells are not stressed by all of these external frequencies and other things. And so people can go through a detox type reaction from just removing some of the external influences. So wondering, when we're talking about the introduction of quantum energy in someone who's maybe a chronic illness, more sensitive patient, do we have this idea of detox reactions? I know if we're thinking about more Bob Naviau and the cell danger response, and how the mitochondria, yes, produce ATP, but they also produce extracellular ATP, which then is more of a danger signal rather than just an energy currency, that if we try to aggressively support the mitochondria, for some people that will also backfire. So when we're thinking about the introduction of a quantum energy, do we need to be slow and low, or is your observation and experience that that's not necessary?
It's absolutely what we always suggest with people, because it's similar. It's not that the quantum energy is going to make you detox, but very similar. Again, it's like, just like you said at the Faraday cages, it is allowing your body to do what it's naturally meant. And if it doesn't have to sit there in a fight or flight response, or just that, it allows it to finally do what it's supposed to do, which is, part of it can be detoxing. So, and that's not always a pleasant experience, which is where you have the bad reactions to it. So what we do suggest is, depending on the products, especially depending on how new you are to the quantum energy. So what we suggest for people, especially with starting out something very similar if they're new to quantum energy, is our Heal Capsule. And the Heal Capsule has 5 titanium spheres that are charged with the quantum energy, which for some people can be a little too much. So you can easily take some of those out and start with 2 or 3. But again, what it's going to be allowing is almost like a safe space or a bubble for your body to do what it needs to finally start doing, which often, yeah, there you go, which is often it needs to start doing some detoxing. So we say start out slow, drink some extra water, be mindful. And I think most people will know pretty quick. So this isn't something you have to be super sensitive. There just is a percentage of people. I'd say maybe 1 out of every 10 people will experience like heavy detoxing, and it's probably because your body really needed it. But that doesn't mean that it's a convenient factor, especially when you have day-to-day life things like you don't really want to be detoxing. So go into it slow. And if you notice that when you put our products near you pretty quickly, your heart rate goes up, I think that's a pretty good sign to like start slow. If you put the Heal Capsule or like one of our blocks next to you, for example, like with one of the blocks, I had to originally sleep with it on the other side of my apartment when I had just gotten it, because it did increase my heart rate too much, because it was kind of bringing this natural amount of energy that hadn't been there. But that was when I lived in Florida, where there is probably one of the highest, most dense areas for 5G, because you have the tsunami evacuation warning system through there. And then as well as just the mold in general is pretty crazy in Florida, anywhere you're at. So I think when I brought that into me, like into like my region, it definitely finally protected, and I'd say it neutralized everything that was harming me at that point and allowed my body to get back to its natural state.
So I'm personally pretty comfortable in the land of energy and frequency and what some might call woo. I've incorporated light and sound and frequency and vibration and lots of different tools into my routine for many years. Really, my mentor, Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt, was the one that early on stressed the importance of using both things from the realm of physics as well as the realm of biochemistry to support the body in healing from these really chronic, complex conditions. And so I think these energetic tools, I really see them as kind of powerful synergizers of things that we're doing with biochemistry as well. So more the 1+1 is not 2, but it's 100. And that the combination of physics and chemistry really synergize one another. One of the things that I really love about what you all are doing with Leela is that you've done a lot of research in this realm. Like you mentioned or alluded to earlier, many companies have things that they sell, but do they actually have research that shows what they do? You have over 60 different research studies, 40 of them that were placebo controlled, several of them that were done by independent parties, some of which I understand may also have been trying to disprove some of what you all were doing. So let's talk about a few of those and some of the things that you learned or observed from those studies. But maybe first, since we're going to get into talking about local application of these things, distance application of these things as well, let's talk a little bit about quantum energy at a distance, the concept of quantum entanglement, and how you all validate that these products can have a similar impact from a distance, just like they might in person.
Yeah, quantum entanglement is such a wild concept. I think a lot of people, one thing is, the 2022 Nobel Prize was awarded on the research of quantum entanglement. But I think it's even sometimes harder to grasp because at least for me, it actually kind of shifted how I viewed reality. When you see these things that occur and you can see the results, even when you're seeing them happen, it really comes across as magic. And how is this happening? This is not how I've thought the world was, when you can have this transfer of everything. Because one thing about quantum entanglement, the really fast, the Nobel Prize when it was awarded was they had one scientist in Austria and they had another scientist who, Scott, you'll at least know the location, but Walnut Creek, California. And they had these entangled cells, and the one in Austria, they were poking and nagging at it. And the one in Walnut Creek was acting simultaneously, instantaneously. No, not even there is no time in between when you talk about the quantum field. So it wasn't like there was a 2-second delay or anything. And a cool fact that they've kind of learned with quantum entanglement is that the kind of like quantum entanglement acts and moves faster than the speed of light. And really, if you wanted to dissect that, the only reason you could say that's not true is because the speed of light requires a point A to point B. When the quantum field and quantum entanglement, there is nothing. It's just connected instant. It's instantaneous. So there is no point A to point B. It's real time as you can get. So that's really cool with that. And, we do have a service that's the technology is based off of in quantum entanglement, but some really cool studies we did before we even had the quantum upgrade service was we were using quantum entanglement with the blocks. And this was the stuff that initially, this was 5 years ago, that was just like, okay, this is woo-woo as it gets. And the stuff you could see. So the studies that we were doing, let's say, Scott, you're over in Denver right now, and I'm over here in Sonoma. And let's say you don't have any Leela products around you right now, but we could test your biomarkers. We could check your HRV. We could do live blood analysis, maybe check your heart rate, calcium channel production, all of that, and get the numbers of that. Let's step back. Sorry. Let's get a number. Let's get all those baseline with no EMFs around you. Right. So we see what your HRV is. Let's see what those biomarkers are where you don't have any stressors. Then let's bring everything back in, your Wi-Fi router, your cell phone, whatever you casually have, and we'll retest those numbers. More times than not, almost every time, even if you're not feeling it, your HRV is going to drop, your calcium channel production can get a little haywire, and you'll see a little bit of clotting in your blood. And then what we could do is, again, I'm over here in Sonoma, California, and you could text me a photo. And these are the studies we were doing. You could text me a photo of yourself on my phone. And I can take that photo of you. And then what's important is it's an identifier. So your eyes are what are the most important for this specific thing that we're doing in quantum entanglement. is I could take that picture of you and I could put it under my block that I have here in Sonoma. And let's wait 10 minutes. You don't have any Leela products in your office still, right? And 10 minutes later, we could retest those biomarkers and they will be the same as if you had a Leela block in the room with you, which would be the same as you were, if the same or better than pre EMF exposure. And that's kind of hard to grasp, and that might be a lot of information for people, but like it is wild, and I totally grasp and understand that. Like with a quantum entanglement, it takes another level of like, wait, like how does this occur?
There was a study that you all did on the use of the Leela quantum block for wound healing, which you mentioned, helping at a cellular level. It found that wound healing improved by 50 to 100%, depending on which experiment you all were doing. So talk to us a little bit about the quantum block. How was it used in that study? Was it that people had it in their home? Was it that we're putting someone's photo in using this concept of quantum entanglement that you just talked about? And is the improved wound healing something the body's then able to continue to do over time? Or is this something where we would apply the quantum energy technology when there was something more acute that needed to be supported?
Yeah, I'll start with the latter part of that question. And, again, I'd say unfortunately, but it is something like, yeah, it's not something that like you can get exposure of quantum energy and then it go like you take it away and you're still getting it. It is something that you would want to keep acutely with you. So if you have an injury, that you need to have it with you, because if you take it away, those external stressors will come back and slow down what was going on. You think of it as almost like a force field in a way that is protecting you to allow your body to recover faster. So it's been a minute since I've looked at that study, but if I remember correctly, that was done at Tulsa University or a state, one of those, I believe. And that was basing it with they did it with the block. And then I also believe they were doing that with quantum entanglement. And what they took was an actual, I believe it was an animal cell, and they like scratched it. And they were going to make a mark on that cell. And then they did it and these were double blind placebo. So they actually, even when they were doing it with the blocks, they'd have sham blocks, like blocks that weren't charged. So like they're doing it with, even though there is a block, it's not charged with the quantum energy, and only one person knew which ones were which. And they were testing those and seeing it. So with the ones that actually were charged and they were given the real devices, that's where they saw the increase, where they're watching this, like they were scratching or marking the cells, the live cells, and its ability to heal itself. I was always, and especially with all of these studies, Scott, I would love to see more and deeper ones just to see how cool that is. The reality is studies cost a very heavy amount of money. And when you're doing the studies, like you're paying people, they can cost $30,000 to $50,000, some of these studies, which, I only mention that because a lot of people wonder why a lot of companies don't have like studies galore. And you would love to if you could find funding for it. And, I think Philip is really open to doing, like, if anyone has ideas for studies, Philip's open. Like, that's the only reason we even know these things. We're not just, most of these studies aren't things that we're just coming up with, like, let's see if it does this. It's coming from someone else asking, or people coming up with benefits that they're experiencing, and then enough people, like our food allergy benefits, which are crazy. Like that wasn't something, it took probably 3 or 4 years for Philip to finally say, okay, there's something really to this. Let's do some studies.
Many people will suggest that the mitochondria are at the core of most chronic health challenges, that we're not able to create enough ATP or cellular currency to support the body, essentially that our batteries are more or less empty. You had one study that conducted 3 separate experiments and was done from over 500 miles away on cells that were exposed to quantum energy. You mentioned earlier the increase in ATP was between 20 and 29%, suggesting that quantum energy can boost cellular energy production. Wondering if we know if that translates to humans. Have we done any human studies on mitochondrial ATP production with Leela technology? And do people commonly feel a shift in their energy when using Leela tech?
Yeah, again, I wouldn't even say that it's the Leela products that are, again, it's not like, hey, because I have this here, I now have up to 29% production. It's literally your body. It's like, technically, let's just say it was the EMFs that were suppressing your ATP production by 29%. And all we're doing is creating a space for your ATP production to be back at its normal amount. So just to be, it's not something like a pill, you take it and you feel energy. It's really that the quantum energy is allowing your body to work in a natural state. And for some people, that might only be 5%. We may have really great ATP production or healthy mitochondria, so they may not see that advancement from bringing something in. Though we have additional frequencies that we put on for, we work with a lot of elite athletes, the best in the world in soccer, NFL, UFC, all this stuff. And we get to see how they anecdotally quantify all their stuff. But again, I'd love to see more studies on how we could do that on a human, because anything that we still have beyond what we've done can be just anecdotal, but there's plenty of people out there that talk about it. But I also understand the power of like actual placebo. And when you're talking anecdotal, you just don't know. But like what we can see is like a lot of like the CrossFit community, like where they're deadlifting, they might be able to do one deadlift at 500 pounds. And then they get them, we'll do the quantum upgrade on them. And then they can do like 600 5 times.
One of the most common things in the chronic illness community is fatigue, lack of energy. So do you anecdotally get feedback from people using quantum energy that they do notice improvements in their energy level?
Absolutely. We actually have which I always recommend anyone, because you can hear from me all day and you can hear from anyone that's associated, but we have Telegram groups, and we have one that's for Leela, and it's about 8,000 people. And then there's a quantum upgrade one that's about 4,000. And that, while we started the group, we don't manage it or like moderate it unless someone tags us and asks us questions. But otherwise, you literally have those are very active. So I like to go in there and just see that, because while I'm in this world as deep as I can be, I'm still constantly learning new things where someone's like, hey, gosh, I wasn't able to usually like fly for 9 hours because the pain. And when I wear the heel capsule, I can now fly to El Salvador for the first time and see my family in 13 years because of their EDS. So we see a lot of anecdotal stuff where they share their stories constantly about not being able to get out of bed, Lyme disease, chronic fatigue syndrome, and seeing, just benefits from that, like the ailments and symptoms kind of being less.
So let's talk then a little bit about EMFs. My mentor in this realm being Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt, who shared with me back in 2006 the importance of getting these things out of our environment if we want to improve health. In fact, back then, I was a patient of his from 2006 to 2012. He wouldn't even take on new patients that weren't willing to really reduce their exposure. So talking about really the goal being more reduction and not relying on harmonization entirely. I think we still want to minimize what we can. But while some people do seem to benefit from tools that are more harmonizing, I think that should still be paired with being smart, EMF hygiene, reduction, all of that. And you all have done several studies on the protective influence of quantum energy on things like 5G and 4G and 3G and all of that. So tell us a little about what's been measured or observed relative to EMF exposure. Is it just having a block in your home that's protective? Is it something we can also do with one of the capsules that you wear or put in your pocket? Can we do it with the frequency cards, with quantum upgrade? What are some of the things that you all have created that can help to mitigate the effects? It's not reducing the EMF itself. If you were going to measure it with a meter, you're still likely to see the same thing. But what are some of the tools that you all have created to help minimize the influence or impact of those fields on your biology?
One thing, I really like that term EMF hygiene. I've never heard that. I love that. So I think that's a great way of awareness for things. So one thing, because I would agree with literally everything that you were just saying and the concerns of it. And also on that end, because while, as you most likely know, I believe there's at least one, if not two cities in the United States that are completely EMF free cities, right? So like it's a real thing. I was part of the Fairfax, which is in Marin County, where we were at the time the only city in the world that banned smart meters successfully. Only city in the world. And this is a very small town. And we were also one of the first to ban 5G when that was coming out. So like, the awareness of EMFs, I'm really liking how people are seeing that. And there's people like, for me, I can go out and about now and be fine, but I can still see some physical effects, like my heart rate goes up, my throat closes up. If I'm in Austin or somewhere where it's really heavy in EMS, Washington, D.C., I can tell it. I can tell the difference. And again, those are different biomarkers than what we're measuring, right? So I could have my heel capsule if I'm in Austin, I could still feel my throat close up a little because that's a different effect, I think, compared to like what the Leela products and the quantum energy is protecting me from. So that's where I acknowledge both ends, where not everyone can just pass through with mitigation. They have more sensitivities. There's other physical responses to EMFs than just what we're talking about with biomarkers. So that being said, with Leela Quantum, we also do have EMF blocking clothing. So we have beanies, we have EMF blocking hats, we have t-shirts, we have jackets. So if you actually do want, and we can mitigate, we can show that with, EMF meters. And for example, if you put your phone in the pocket, it's not going to work. So we do have it at that level if you choose. And we also have those are charged with certain frequencies, which is pretty cool. But the majority of everything. So, on the other end, we're going to talk about EMFs. Like EMF for the focus with Leela Quantum is really just about 10% of the products. Because everything at a baseline is charged with quantum energy. And so what we're talking about is the byproduct benefits of quantum energy. But like what Philip really focuses on is the imprinted frequencies. So while the EMFs are an important thing, Philip's main thing is the frequencies and how are we imprinting these to help people. So I think we have both sides and we try to have both awareness of like, I also understand it's the same thing with someone who has a whole list of autoimmune diseases. Like they really don't have the luxury to have a slice of cake. That's unfortunate. I can go have a slice of cake. I'm not going to feel great the next day, but I have that ability. And there are many people in this world who don't have that cushion. Like they just have to stay away from sugar. They have to stay away from gluten. They can't do it, right? So it's the same thing. And with that would be kind of with this EMF mitigation, I'd say. And that's where I would suggest like the EMF blocking clothing as opposed to just relying on the quantum energy for your EMF experience or situation.
So let's talk then a little bit about some of the studies that you all have done. I know Dr. Beverly Rubik. I actually worked with her when I lived in the Bay Area. I know she's done some studies on some of the Leela tech as well. So looking at the impact of quantum energy on Wi-Fi radiation and the blood using dark field microscopy, which is one of her areas of expertise. What did she observe that was happening in the blood when someone was exposed to Wi-Fi, and how did that then change with the introduction of the Leela quantum block?
So Dr. Beverly Rubik was one of how we kind of mentioned before, some of the people who started as like a naysayer or wanted to, quantify that this is all a scam and measure it. And she was one of those people. And she came back afterwards and was like, this is incredible. One of our biggest advocates now. And that was because with her dark field microscopy, she saw that like with specifically actually the COVID vaccine, she saw that there was extra blood clotting occurring with people post-vaccine. And when she would introduce the infinity block into that person's region, it would make the blood much more visceral. So it was actually removing the blood clots that were being occurred. And again, though, these are important little details in my opinion, but it's like, this isn't a forever thing. So if you remove the block from your environment, then the blood goes back to how it was too. So that's why, it's important if you can to have like a heal capsule or some other wearable where you're exposed to it much easier. You don't have to carry a block around. But yeah, so with what we also saw is very similar with the EMFs is in just in general with live blood analysis, if you have inflammation, if you have a stress or whatever, you can see it with the blood because the blood starts to get stickier. I believe they just call it money rolls, like where the blood
like Rouleau. I think in the dark field. Yeah, Rouleau.
Yeah, Rouleau. So like that's what they're measuring the stress on. And they can say, okay, this blood is not happy. And then you bring in, they do this for more things than just, quantum, obviously way more than what we're doing it for. But and then when you bring in and introduce quantum energy, again, some form of source of it, then the blood is going back to happy in a way.
While I personally wouldn't want to have an electric car because of the fields that they create around us, talk to us about the potential use of quantum energy as a way to protect the body from some of those fields. If we are in an electric vehicle, how can we use that energy to mitigate the biological impact of being in an electric car? And would we then wear a capsule or would you have a travel block in the car? What tools could we potentially use?
I was one of those people that was first in line for 8 hours in Walnut Creek at the Tesla for the Model 3. I waited forever. And I remember the first time I sat in a Model 3, I had to get out instantly. Because same thing, like while I'm not super sensitive to EMFs, that thing was so heavy, it made me nauseous, and I got really almost like a vertigo right away. So I totally acknowledge like how rough those are. And we've done some studies. One of them that we did in Europe was actually, I mentioned Tesla, but we did a study with a car brand that actually, which I believe, luckily, they're going to stop making electric cars. We're not really allowed to talk about who that company is, but I can tell you that the EMFs are way worse on those vehicles than they are the Teslas. And they're a European company that not because of this, but they're going to stop making them because people weren't buying them. But so we have double-blind placebo-controlled studies with that. And what we can see is that, again, if you have one of our products or technology with you, then it is harmonizing all of the EMFs on the biomarkers that we're testing. So again, HRV, we do the calcium channels, heart rate, and live blood analysis. So what I would suggest if you have a vehicle, so of course, if you have a heal capsule, you're good, but that's just for you. What about the rest of your family or anyone sitting in there? So there's a few options you could do. One would be to have a travel block. Luke's story has like an infinity block set up in that, but I mean, in all honesty, that's like, okay, hey, I'm protecting myself and everyone in traffic. So if you want to do that, go for it. But our travel block would be sufficient. It's about 300 meters in radius anyway, so it'll protect everyone in there. Another thing you can do, not jumping too far ahead, but is to utilize our quantum upgrade service, because that's the quantum entanglement, and that is protecting the entire car at all times and anyone that's in the car.
One of the studies on 5G exposure found a reduction in gamma activity associated with stress in the limbic system, as well as an increase in alpha activity associated with relaxation, an increase in HRV as well. So in this realm of people with chronic Lyme and mold illness, we talk a lot about the limbic system being impaired. We talk a lot about having low vagal tone. We talk a lot about high sympathetic dominance. So I'm wondering, when we're using some of these tools that are mitigating or removing the impact of these external influences, do we then find that the body shifts into more of a parasympathetic tone, into more of a healing response? Do we find that the nervous system seems to regulate better, kind of calm down?
Yeah, like you're saying, it's when you lower the beta and the gamma brain wavelengths, you're boosting the alpha and the theta, which we can talk a little bit about that study because that's one of our newest, and it's really cool. The quantum field just supports the parasympathetic dominance, so it's promoting rest, healing, and digestion, regeneration, and again, your body's able to breathe. It's just kind of like it puts in a okay, similar to like a detox, like we we're saying before, it may not be wanted, but that's what it's kind of supporting out there. So the study we did with that, I'm going to look at the information just because I don't want to misspeak on these because they're very specific numbers, but they are really very cool. And what we did was a 256 channel EEG machine, and we could not find one at all in the United States. Andrew Hill was like, yeah, you're not going to find those here. They're just millions of dollars. And we worked with Jim Hart from BioCybernaut, and no one had the capability because we wanted to replicate this. And there's one doctor in Austria. We're trying to find as much as we can do in the United States, but all these technologies are way more available over in Europe. So while we looked for it in the United States, we have yet to find anyone with a 256 channel EEG. And so what we did is we put iPhone up to someone for about 30 minutes, and we tested their numbers, their gamma, alpha, theta, all of that stuff. And then usually what we do is we would introduce, and this was through a very specific brain support frequency that we have on the quantum upgrade, as well as you can get cards and stuff with it. But we wanted to wait 10 minutes, let it do its thing. But the doctors were like, well, we're going to do it right away. Let's do this. Let's see how fast it works. And so they measured the numbers within seconds of it being active. And so what they saw, and I'm sorry, I'm just going to read this because I want to get the exact numbers, but the gamma brain wavelengths, right, they decreased 77.6%. The beta decreased 82.9%. So just to reiterate, like you said before, beta and gamma kind of cause the anxiety, the negative things that we don't really want, the stress, that's all coming from those. So, those are what we don't want. So that has been suppressed. And in response to that, we saw an alpha increase of 1,300%. So 13 times the amount while having the phone exposed to you. So the same thing showed increase, of course, in the alpha. The theta was increased. We had the HRV was increased by 7%. And they also did a sleep study showing that the REM and deep sleep increased on average 2 to 3% for people. So those are the more recent studies that we did. And I mean, again, better deep, better REM, better sleep, higher HRV, all good for people wanting to heal.
So, talking then about one of the key markers that we might look to as an indication of vitality and our ability to maintain balance, our reserves, essentially, maybe an indication of sympathetic, parasympathetic tone as well, is HRV or heart rate variability. It's been one of those things that I've been very interested in for many years, but it's not super easy to find things that make it significantly shift, at least for those of us that are still type A minus type personality. It's not the easiest. So wondering if we can talk a little more about how we might use the Leela quantum energy tools to increase HRV. Is it fairly common that we see measurable increases in heart rate variability when people introduce quantum energy? And does an increase in HRV also potentially correlate to a reduction in or a balancing of cortisol levels and other stress hormones in the body itself?
I would say, depending on the root cause of the increase of cortisol, again, if it's an environmental factor, then for sure it's going to lower it. If it's for some other, emotional stress or something like that, less likely, because it's coming from something that the quantum energy isn't so much going to be supportive of. And with sleep, for sure. But the other end of it is, like, again, when we see people talk about the increase in HRV, they're talking about on the aura, they looked at the aura ring, the whoop and stuff. And I mean, how accurate is that always? That's the question. So that's not a hill I die on for people where it's like, well, my aura ring says I increased HRV. And also there's so many variables. Now, what we're using are like and I don't know the name, I apologize, but when we're at like conferences, we actually have like a standalone HRV machine that takes quite some time to do the measurements, sets up around your wrists, and we're measuring it on something that is solely focused on HRV measurements, not something like an aura ring or whoop, all those ones that also measure 20 other things, and the accuracy can be a little off, but I do put more faith into the actual HRV stuff. And as far as our products, I would really say all of them. In terms of, again, with the quantum energy, every product is going to be charged with quantum energy. But also, if you want to try something a little more advanced, we have multiple different products that have different types of frequencies imprinted that could support higher HRV recovery, sleep, calm, rest. I just believe, in terms of HRV and increasing HRV is really important to me. So we have frequencies that we could use for that, which would be self-love. We have calm. We have even heart chakra opening, all that type of stuff. Now, we don't have any studies with that, but I believe, because I'm big on that. So like breath work, being present, and meditation, all these frequencies that we have on products can also support that and increasing the HRV.
Many of our listeners will be familiar with the work of Dr. Emoto and how thoughts or frequency can impact that crystalline structure of water. Some will also know about easy water from Gerald Pollack's work. One of the studies that you did with the Emoto Institute found that crystalline structure of water was enhanced with Leela Quantum Tech. So talk to us about water, about hydration, what you see when people are using Leela to improve the quality of their water, hopefully then having more hydration at a cellular level. Which of the Leela tools would be most appropriate for optimizing the structure of our water?
Yeah, I'm a big water geek. I think it's one of the most just wildest things out there, because, and as cheesy as this can sound, with everything I've ever learned, the more you learn about the water, the more you learn we don't know anything about water. And that's one of those subjects with it that I assure you, it's like, we really don't know much about water. And I've worked with the highest, most educated people and helped with the water world. And I tell you, it's a fascinating place, because depending on how far you want to go into this, like the real job of water is to be a bridge of communication. People look at water as hydration. Well, it's not so much that the water is hydrating us, it's what's it bringing to us into our cells that's hydrating, right? So water is a chameleon. It changes just like our heart rate. It changes just like everything else instantly. If I'm doing studies with water all by myself here, Scott, I'll get the same number 200 times, right? The same results, same tension, same everything. And let's say you come into the room and you're in a really good mood. You're in the best mood ever. That water is going to feed off of your energy and it's going to change. And I'll see more positive than me. Then when I was just here by myself, I was serious and I was just getting data. when you walk into that room, that water's tension will change. And that's fascinating to think like how it is a very social creature, if you want to call it that way. And it's a mirror of what's surrounding. So that I know that's a big wraparound of this conversation, but it goes back to quantum energy. And when you test water, you're looking, it's a real-time snapshot. It doesn't stay that way. Just like our heart rate. We check our heart rate now, we check it in 5 minutes. It's really unlikely it's going to be the same. And the same thing with water. So if you have a room that has Wi-Fi or loud music, the water is stressed. It's going to be not as healthy and presentable as it should be. That's what happens with tap water. It's going through these pressurized systems. It's hitting 90-degree angles. It's being jolted and it's stressed. It doesn't know what's going on. It's being separated. So you have very stressed, gross looking water under a microscope. But when you can present it into a calm, loving area, then you're going to have a calm, loving water. And again, it's a perfect mirror. So with our products, again, we are creating this very calming and supportive experience for the water to do it. And now the term of structure, right, is changing the tension and anything of the water. So what we're doing is we can add frequencies to water. And there's a lot of cool things you can do with that. So you can add frequencies depending on what you want to add. It doesn't mean that's imprinted into that water forever. Because again, you take that water and you go into traffic and you're driving the road and it's vibrating. Negative music or positive music is on there. It's going to change the constitute of the water. So what we did with Emoto, just as everyone knows, Emoto did words and the water came out because it's a supportive environment. And it's the same thing with the Leela technology. When you're presenting it with just a quantum energy, it's literally the same as, and we're saying, hey, you can increase wound healing by, twice as much. It's the same thing we're presenting that same environment for the water, while also being able to, if we choose to, add frequencies to it, and the water will absorb those frequencies. But again, it's not something that stays for months or days, or it just depends. So it's kind of hard to say like what it's doing at the study is it's a snapshot, and you want to keep the Leela products next to it if you want to continue those results.
Another really interesting research project that you all have done that will be of much interest to this community is the use of the infinity block on food tolerance. And I've heard you talk in other interviews about your personal experience with being able to better tolerate some foods that were charged versus reacting to those that were not. So talk to us a little bit about what charging or putting food in a block is doing and why it may then no longer lead to an allergic reaction. And then whether or not we might be able to extrapolate that study to potentially mean that people with mast cell activation syndrome, with histamine intolerance, might then be less triggered by food that's been charged in one of the blocks. And then I'm curious, as an add-on, do you take a block with you when you eat at restaurants?
Yeah. Okay. So let's make sure I answer all those questions because all those excite me. I just want to make sure I don't go too far off the track with that one, Scott. But what we started with, again, as most, what we call ourselves biohackers or just self-imposed people that want to be healthy, right? Like I do a lot of experiments. And when I was first learning about Leela Quantum, I remember them saying that it harmonizes and neutralizes all harmful things. And that includes waveform patterns. And I was like, cool. I mean, I am severely allergic to crab, avocado, and honey. It's not fatal, but it is 8 hours of extreme discomfort into my nasal cavity, my face, eyes, everything burns, itches, and swells up. So I wanted to try it. And it's just an allergy that occurred about when I turned 30, all of those. So I know how good crab tastes and shellfish and avocado and honey. So sometimes I still be worth the deal with it. So what I did was I took some crab initially, and this was like in 2020, and I put it for about 10 minutes and I ate it and I had no problem. I was like, well, that's awesome. That's also really weird. So over the next few days, because again, I'm a strong believer, I understand the power of our mind, and placebo can be completely a true thing. So over the past next few days, what I did is I'd have my wife either put it in the block or not, and I wouldn't know, like in the other room. And then she would serve it to me. And every time, if it wasn't in the block, within seconds, it would hit me. And if it was in the block, I wouldn't have a problem. So we did this on stage at Dave Asprey's group in front of like hundreds of people, where we took a derma roller and we derma rolled my arm and we put crab meat on it. And it just blew up instantly. It looked like I had been stung by like 100 bees. And while we were talking, we took that same crab and put it under a block. So we talked for like 6 or 7 minutes on the stage. And we did my other arm and did the dermal roller, and there was no issue whatsoever. One really cool side thing, because, of course we can just tell this, but we have to show people visually. I understand you want to visually see it, because otherwise I could be lying, like, oh yeah, there's no pain and there's nothing going on. So one cool thing that did occur that we couldn't visually show was my arm that was really irritated and hurt so bad. When I put it under the block, the irritation went away. The bumps were still there, but I got like a cooling sensation, probably from the blood flowing there. Really, that's my theory. But it was really cool that I could put my arm under that block, the one that was really irritated, and no issue. So beyond that, we started having other people in a Telegram group like, hey, I'm severely allergic to lemon juice, and I was just able to put a teaspoon under the block for 10 minutes, and I could consume it now with no problem. So we started having a lot of people give these, anecdotal and subjective experiences. So at some point, Philip's like, okay, there's something to this, let's do it. So in the UK, we did a study, and I don't want to misspeak on this, and you may actually know way better than I do, Scott, but like when you can check, there are levels in your urine that you can check for when you have an allergic reaction to something. And that's how they were basing this. So like you could check your urine levels if you eat something, and then it's some form of a protein, I believe. But if you have eaten something you're allergic to, and when you urinate, it'll show up in there. So they did these double-blind placebo-controlled studies in the UK with like sugar and gluten and a few other items. And what they saw was a 92% suppression in the stress that those items put on the body. And again, the way they were measuring this was through urine samples. So, and again, I don't know well enough in terms of I believe it's a protein that shows up in your urine if you're having some kind of really bad allergic reaction to whatever you've consumed. So, and what Ian Mitchell does to explain this probably the best is he talks about how it's like, if you look at the ocean, how it's all the waves are on top, and you got those rough waves underneath this calm. It's the rough waves that are probably our bodies are interacting with and give us an allergic reaction. So if you could like wipe off the disruption, now you have a smooth ocean, and your body will kind of interact with it better. So it's a weird thing, because it's also not something we're saying if you have celiac, you're in the clear, go have gluten, but it will significantly suppress it. So for sure, I go out to eat we have the travel block, and I always bring the travel block. And if I ever go out to eat with Philip, they bring the Infinity big block, and they put it on the table, and they'll put all the bread through it and a lot of the food through it to neutralize it.
And I think what you were just talking about, I've heard some people refer to it as destructive interference, essentially collapsing the wave so that there's really nothing there. So building on that then, have you had people that were in that mast cell activation syndrome, histamine intolerance population that then felt like they were better able to tolerate maybe food, but I'm also thinking about, and we may talk a little bit later, supplements as well, because a lot of times people are so sensitive that the exact thing they might need to move their healing forward, they can't tolerate. So might we find then that in that mast cell community, that charging something before they take it, whether it's food or supplements, might increase potentially their tolerance to it?
We don't have any actual studies with that, but I have read things for sure on the Telegram group. So these are individual experiences, not something that we have backed up data with, where they have less negative responses, and their bodies just seem to be able to manage it better.
And for people listening, if you have an anaphylactic reaction, please don't try this at home. We want to be safe with things that you're experimenting with. I want to come back just for a moment to the hypercoagulation conversation, the accumulation of fibrin that impacts blood flow, nutrient delivery, oxygen delivery, waste removal, all of that. And I think that that's a much bigger issue now that we're in the era of COVID with spike proteins and endothelial inflammation and microclotting. There was one of the studies that was done in Austria that suggested that blood health and circulatory health were improved with the Leela Infinity block. Wondering if that means that having a block in your home is going to then convey that same benefit to everyone in the home. If people are dealing with blood viscosity issues, is that potentially going to support everyone in that same home?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the benefits of the block. Now, the closer you are to the block, the better, but most of them have ranges that easily bypass what the space of your house is. So the difference, of course, is like the inside is what we call like a quantum energy generator. So like your food needs to be put inside it if you really want to charge it. If you want the water can sit outside and be structured, but if it's inside, it structures it way faster. And same thing. So just to be clear with that, you not just because you have a block in your house is all your food allergies away. Like you need to actually put it under the block. But with everything else, you're pretty much everyone in that region, whether it's 800 meters to, a kilometer to 2 kilometers, we have a range of that. You are benefiting the people in the family, anyone in the room or in the house, and most likely some of your neighbors can be benefiting from the mitigations of the EMFs, as well as anything else that's stressing them.
So oxidative stress is a factor that drives inflammation. Inflammation is kind of at the core of many chronic conditions and things as we get older. Has there been some research done on the impact of Leela Quantum Tech on oxidative stress, on levels of inflammation? Is that something that you've measured and seen improvements with the quantum energy introduction? And then building on that, is that Heal 360 frequency, which is a newer one, as I understand, and we'll talk more about that later, but is that potentially one of the better options for inflammation?
Yeah, I think actually a few months ago, you had some great questions for me through email about the inflammation markers. And because I was open to that. And I said, that's a great idea. And I remember forwarding all that to Philip in terms of ways to test for like inflammation at what your standards were. So I did forward that over to him. And again, I know those are always in the works because when he sees new ideas of how to do it, we want to see if they work or not. Because not everything's going to be successful, but it's like we're still open to everything working. So that being said, we don't really have any inflammation markers as far as I am aware of that we've actually published. Besides, again, it goes right back to the EMFs, right? Because one of the stresses of EMFs is oxidative stress too, or one of the consequences of it. So we could see that, but we don't have any studies showing like the anti-inflammatory besides, again, making the blood thinner, which can also be a form of inflammation, but not probably at the scientific level that we would love for it to be.
I want to talk a little bit about environmental toxicants. We know that these are such a health negating factor when we're thinking about things like heavy metals or pesticides or chemicals or now microplastics, nanoplastics. I mean, the list just gets longer and longer. One of your studies looked at the transformation of pollutant frequencies such as metals and kind of transforming that into a life promoting frequency. So what does it mean to say that these life endangering stress factors related to heavy metals, for example, are neutralized and transformed by Leela? And does mitigating the negative influence of a heavy metal, for example, does that then mean we are more effective at removing these from the body or detoxifying them? Or do they still stay there, but we've essentially minimized their potential to harm?
I love that question. Again, maybe make sure I answer all of those in the pieces. I get really excited when you ask one question going on with that. So basically, yes, we're neutralizing the harmful aspect of it. So let's also maybe compare this to really cool studies that are done with structured water, where structured water it's so smart. It actually has a consciousness. And what it will do is it'll encapsulate toxins. So you're still drinking the water. And we can see this if you properly, truly structure water and revitalize it. You can drink water in Mexico. You could drink the water. That's why you can literally go to Yosemite and drink the running water because it's so structured. You really likely won't get sick because it's encapsulating it. And while we're still consuming it, your body isn't utilizing or even responding to the negative things in there. And then you excrete it as well. And I would say it's very similar with this, where it's there. We're not blocking it, but we're stopping your body from being affected by it.
And did I understand correctly that then potentially increases your ability to also excrete it? Or are we saying that that's not so important because we've mitigated the potential harm?
That's a great little part of that, because I would say that it's still there, that your body is less reactive to it. And the reason I say that is because we see things like breast implants where people have issues with that. And as long as while they're still there, you can put your body in one of the bigger, like the gram blocks, and it will mitigate the bad, like breast implant illness symptoms that people experience. So that's bringing two different pieces of information into the puzzle here. but I don't think it would separate. I don't think it like dispose of it. Again, that does bring an opportunity for your body to remove it because it can detox it, but it doesn't mean like things like microplastics too or stuff you're inhaling are going to magically go out as well. But I don't think it doesn't give it the effect. Same thing with parasites. We see, I believe it's an 82% or 80% decrease in parasitic load. So the way our bodies respond and the effectiveness of it, because those are low vibration, whatever you want to call them, creatures right now. And when you're running at such a high frequency, they can't be around. So
I do want to come back to the microbes. I guess maybe the way I'm thinking about this based on what you've conveyed then is removing the influence of the external environment, the influence of EMFs, a lot of things that potentially block our innate ability to detoxify could then improve our ability to remove some of these environmental toxicants independently of the quantum energy's ability to block their potential harm.
yeah, and I hate to keep running circles with it, but I think this goes back to where I believe this is benefiting is really it's allowing your body to be at its natural state. And we've been around for hundreds of thousands of years prior while and having issues. And it's the same thing with grounding, right? Like if we walked around barefoot, we could have a lot of our issues probably go away because we're connected to the earth and we're getting natural healing from that, getting blood to be more flowing. And that's a different kind of example, of course. But like I believe our bodies, without all these external stressors, it is so resilient. It can handle these things. It can remove things. But it's if I threw myself, I had Lyme disease, and I'm living under a cell tower, and I'm in a moldy house, like I'm going to have problems that my body can't keep up with. If I'm somewhere in the woods in a cabin, my body's way more capable of removing things, dealing with things, removing it, whatever it needs to do.
So that's a good segue to my next question, which is on mold and mycotoxins. Many of our listeners have dealt with or are dealing with mold and mycotoxins. For many, it's a key driver of their illness. Many people with chronic Lyme, the mold is actually probably more significant. So do we know if quantum energy has any impact in that mold and mycotoxin realm? Are there tools from Leela that might help mitigate the negative impact of the mycotoxins, for example? And then I'm even kind of thinking, I know I've heard Dietrich Klinghardt talk about how higher levels of EMFs influence molds to be more aggressive and produce more mycotoxins. It'd be interesting to see if there was any impact on the Leela Quantum Tech in that realm in terms of mold proliferation, mycotoxin production, anything you've seen in the mold and mycotoxin community relative to quantum energy.
Yeah, we don't have any science to back up things. So everything with that is definitely anecdotal or putting, A and B to make C with this stuff. But again, it goes back to the parasitic load and the decrease. When you have things that are vibrating at a higher frequency, it's the same thing. If we increase our pH, there's disease that can't really be in our body, right? So same thing with this, when we're increasing our frequency, things are less effective. So just because you have a Leela block, it doesn't mean you're going to be free of the mold, but it's also going to make it less effective. I wholeheartedly believe that without any science, but when you're raising the vibration, everything that is lower vibrating definitely does not, it's not successful there, but it doesn't mean it's going to remove it or remove all the issues that you have there, but it'll suppress its ability.
The topic of autism is a common one these days, given the current administration. Here we're talking about those that are having challenges that go far beyond. I don't want to insult anyone that thinks more in the healthy neurodiversity realm, but when we're talking about kids that are significantly impacted, in the study that you did, you looked at ATEC scores using both the distance method and the quantum capsule as well. That study was 9 months long. Their baseline ATEC score was 97.71. So we want that to reduce. It ultimately dropped to 64.45. So do we know what factors the study participants had that the quantum energy was supporting that maybe led to that ATEC score reduction? Talk to us a little more about the potential for quantum energy in those that are on the spectrum.
Yeah, we're actually doing deeper studies with that because a lot of that stuff, and that initially all started again by a doctor that was in India who ran an entire institute or academy for the ASD and just autism spectrum disorder. And he asked for a few of these blocks because he wanted to do some tests, and we put them in there, and he didn't tell anyone else that he had these blocks in there. And when they would do these journals, he found that Mondays were always the best days, basically, because the kids had and the parents were the ones that were writing the journals, and they would see that like parents would be like, well, they have way less aggression. They're having consistent bowel movements, which most people, if you've ever worked with people in the spectrum, that's one of the most challenging difficulties is constant or consistent bowel movements and aggression. The end of it is the spectrum is so wide nowadays. It's not like everyone's going to be aggressive. There's a smaller percentage, but where this place was, it's definitely more concentrated with the lower functioning autism. So there was more aggression in terms of the students. So they were seeing lower aggression, much more calm, relaxed, and less ADHD experiences from them. And so while we do have that, I know we're in the middle right now of doing a much more larger, broader with way more and more data with that. So I'm more excited to see what the next one's going to say. But again, with that, what is it doing? That I just really don't know, because is it the higher frequencies and you're creating a calmer environment for them? Are they experiencing and seeing things or that we can't see or experience because they're way more sensitive, just the way they see light flickering much easier than we can? That can be distracting to them and overstimulating to them. Like, what is it that's causing more of a calm experience? That being said, I can tell you, whenever anyone that ever comes to our house or property, don't know anything about Leela products, they're just like, this place is so calm, and I will hang that all to the Leela product. So like, it definitely provides a very almost like safe experience, like environment for people.
It's kind of funny that you said that, because it could be completely unrelated, but I lived in this house for a little less than 3 years. In that time, I had one bird's nest. I got a Leela super block, and now I currently have 4 bird's nests, all like right outside the house here. And so it's kind of interesting. I wonder if they're drawn to the quantum energy for some reason.
I honestly, I believe so. So where I live, I'm out as country as you can almost get for California. I've got 6 acres, and I back up to a biodynamic vineyard, which is really cool. And then the other side of my property is 60 acres, just horse training. So they have race horses, and then they have polo horses. And then there's just a ton of wildlife. And since we've moved in, our neighbors, who are both they talk to us, all the turkey come to our property. They stay off their property, and the horses all the time are at the corner of the property as close as they can to ours. They spend their days at the corner where the big gates are, so that they can't come in. And they've told us like they were happy because the guy with the horses was like, well, I don't have to kill the turkeys anymore, and it's better for them that they stay on your property. We're not going to kill them. But we have geese that come over here, and like out of all the areas, they're all coming to our property. And the deer come right up and they lay against our house, like constantly. They just put their body up against the house, like laying down.
Hopefully they keep their ticks away from your
house. That's a big stressor here. That's a stressor here is the ticks.
I mean, especially in Marin County. You're very close to where I got Lyme disease many years ago. So yes.
Yeah, it's rampant. The ticks here are rampant. And that's the thing to be very mindful of.
So I don't know that you all have done a study yet, but I have heard some discussion around quantum energy in the realm of fertility. So wondering what's been observed around fertility and using quantum energy tools like those from Leela.
Yeah, that's great, because we actually do. I'm not 100%. I believe it's been published. If not, it's very soon about to be published. But so we do have EMF blocking and quantum charge of specific frequency underwear for both men and women. We're the only and first company to create women's underwear that is quantum charged, as well as EMF blocking. But you can get men's underwear from other companies, but ours is also quantum charged and actually comfortable, and it's got added frequencies. But I believe we just saw like a 96% increase in sperm production from men. We did a study with that, and I'm not sure if that one is published, but once we have that, we usually do it with about 100 or more people. And then once we get that, we can do bigger studies. But that when we saw that, so for sperm production, we're seeing a significant increase. But again, that's also because we're doing what you should be doing. We're blocking the testicles from EMFs, so they're less stressed. So they're doing so again, 96% or so isn't just because that there's like, hey, you have this and here you have it. It's literally we are protecting the body, and now it can do what it's meant to do. Like it wants to reproduce, so it's going to produce. So the EMFs might have dropped the production by 96%, and then protecting from it brought it back to its normal level.
You guys need to get a pair of those to Brian Johnson, because I think he measures his sperm every day, essentially.
Oh gosh.
I don't know that it's really every day, but it is one of the things that he looks at.
He does do it a lot. Yeah. Erections and sperm health.
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit before we get into talking specifically about some of the products. I want to talk a little bit about microbes. And you talked about parasites. I know I've heard Philip talk about quantum energy and the reduction of parasites that was observed. I know he's also talked about we would still want to use other things, not rely solely on quantum energy, but maybe we're also using herbs or other plant medicines, things of that nature, and using the quantum energy as a complementary tool to really synergize other things that we're doing as well. So many of our listeners are dealing with chronic Lyme and chronic viruses, fungal issues, SIBO, just a lot of persistent chronic infections. So wondering what you're seeing in that population with chronic infections, what their experience is with Leela Tech. And I know there is the exertion response and microbial harmony frequency card. Curious if that has a place in this realm, what that might be supporting. And then taking that a step further, I heard a rumor that you all have some active research happening in the realm of Lyme disease specifically, which my listening audience and I personally am very excited about as well. So wondering what you can tell us about that.
Yes. Okay. So the frequency you said is technically mostly focused on allergies, like seasonal allergies. So it can help with that. They've changed the name on that, I believe, because they've added a few frequencies to that to change the name. But prior to that was our allergy support, allergy seasonal support was the name of that one. So I've changed a little bit. And really, I personally, and especially I work in another level with like animal medicine of combo. I work with a lot of people coming off of like with other digestive issues. And while we always have the Leela products around here, people are exposed to, I've never read any, even a Telegram group or someone who's in person see any relief to that. I could see it maybe helping like suppress some of the symptoms, but nothing at a root cause by any means. Where I would be more inclined to say it would be beneficial is if you already have a block in any of your supplements or anything you take, putting those inside the block. Any supplements you take and put them inside the block, especially if you have digestive challenges. We did do a study, but this was with Wizard Sciences, where we took the grand block and we took our supplements and we saw a 30% increase with like absorption rate for putting under the block for like 2 minutes. So
glad I'm charging my supplements each week with the super block then. That's awesome.
Yeah, you can actually see that study on Wizard Sciences page under like the Quanta supplements, because they have a whole line of quantum charge supplements, and there's you can see it in there where it's showing the increase in effectiveness.
So talk to us then in this chronic Lyme kind of realm, which tools, if any, from Leela might we want to be drawn to? And I think you guys are working on a more Lyme specific frequency, if I understood correctly.
Yes, I have not a clue when that will be coming out. There's so many things down the pipeline and they're all exciting. But I get a little too emotionally involved or connected. So I get way too excited to the point where I'm like, I'd rather not know when these are coming, because some of these things are like, oh, they're coming in a year. Like I'm going to lose sleep for a year because I'm so excited for these. Like we have dog food containers coming out. We have dog bowls. It's like, I've been waiting on those for a year and they're just finally about to come out. Same thing with like the jackets and all the things that we had were coming out. Was so long. So I actually don't know when we expect to have like any of the Lyme frequencies to come out. I do know that's very important to Philip though. So hopefully it's very soon.
So let's now talk about some of the specific product offerings that you all have. First, talk to us a little bit about the Hawkins scale, what that's measuring, and where the various quantum energy products from Leela kind of fall on that scale. What does a higher Hawkins scale suggest? And is there a way that specific value is measured?
So David Hawkins created, the map of consciousness. And back then when he created it, it maxed out at about 1,000. And, the key points is like 500 is unconditional love. And you don't really want to be vibrating anything much lower, but I mean, in terms of things that you have. So that's where like our quantum upgrade becomes really cool, because you can customize all that on a quantum entanglement level too. But all of our products, really the ones that we are geared towards calibrating, are our blocks. Now, after 2012, they believe there was this very strong shift in the world that allowed the map of consciousness to significantly increase by its limit. So it's no longer at 1,000. And we can get measured. Like, there's other items, not just ours, but there are other products out there that can resonate and calibrate at significantly higher than just 1,000, on this map of consciousness level. And I guess we also step back in case you realize, like, David Hawkins, of course, was had like the largest psychiatrist practice in New York. And he wrote Power versus Force, which a lot of people might know if they want to connect to who we're talking about, in case it's a new name to people. And after 2012, though, there's a large, like, basically the Earth's consciousness significantly increased. So it's allowing more things to happen. We have master calibrators, multiple people that are able to calibrate these from different sources. So it's not just like an internal testing of us saying, hey, this is the number. We're getting these numbers through third party, through, again, master calibrators, people who worked with David Hawkins and can, calibrate 1,000 times a day about things. They're getting these results. So the blocks are the things that really you want to focus on. Our super block is at like 5,800. And that's why also, like, that's where, for example, if you are new to quantum energy and you got thrown into the room with a super block, you're probably likely to detox, like, not like instantly, but your heart rate will go up. You'll feel the intensity of like the vibration on it. And they go down to about, we have our travel block, which is less. We have our infinity, I believe that's about 1,800, or the quantum, and I think our infinity now is at 2,400 or grand. They all are little different numbers to be charged in frequency. The importance of that really is, like, it doesn't really mean it's going to be way more intense, but it's vibrating at a much higher level. So it's also, again, it's not protecting you more from EMFs, to be clear. It's just vibrating at a higher level, like, consciousness.
I want to talk a little bit now about the Heal compared to the Heal 360 frequency. So when I started working with Leela products several years ago, I had the Heal capsule. That's still what I have. That's the one that had the nutritional bio base that you mentioned, that potentially could help with assimilation and such of nutrients and help balance your own spectra cell. My understanding is that the Heal capsule is no longer available. So if somebody is wanting then to do something in that realm of nutrients deficiencies, my understanding is they probably then are going to be drawn more towards the frequency card or quantum upgrade, and that the capsules now are the Heal 360. So wondering if you can just kind of compare the Heal versus the Heal 360 and confirm if my understanding is correct, that if we're looking more for that bio base of nutrients, that we would now need to be using a frequency card or quantum upgrade.
The main big difference, I guess, really was the Heal 360 was really cool because it was brought together by a community in a way of like a contest, right? So a lot of people brought them together and they changed everything. And the name, of course, 360, I think, can be confusing. Originally, even confused me, whereas like just the 360 added to it. But it is fairly different. It does have still has nutrients in it that was customized. In fact, just the other day I was going through it and I saw that it has EG/CG, which I think is really cool because a lot of people on another end are always asking like how to find that. Just as a side note, I didn't realize that was part of the frequency in there. So it is fairly different. With, I think, having the name Heal could confuse me originally too, with like what its focus was. But the vast variety of these has probably like 45 different frequencies, from like salt, and has spring water. It's got like tiger eye stone, and it's a vast variety of different things. But if you want the Heal itself, which I'm lucky, I still have one of those from the older days, is a capsule. But if not, you can go with like our frequency card. But I would also really suggest the quantum upgrade. Yeah. So I think out of everything, if you're going to spend the money on a Heal like card, you may as well do the quantum upgrade. That's my opinion.
So it sounds like then, unless somebody really wants that original nutrient bio base, that the Heal 360 has pretty much become the go-to, particularly when we're talking now about the capsules. That is the only frequency set that's available in the capsule. So if they want the heal frequency, they're going to do the frequency card or quantum upgrade. If they want the heal 360, then the capsule could be a great place for someone to start if they just really want to get into experiencing Leela and quantum energy.
Yeah, our capsules are always the best route to go, especially like considering the investment of them and getting, dipping your toes in the water. That's the route I would go. It's always the first most common thing to purchase. But, another really cool thing with the blocks and capsules, by the way, something that Scott, I'm sure you either do, if you don't, you would really utilize is how you're able to transfer frequencies and create your own capsules if you wanted to as well. And that might be something your audience might even be, if they're very specific, they might be more interested. Like to purchase a capsule is a great way to be introduced to quantum energy. But like if you are very specific on what you want, you can buy a block and then you can transfer frequencies of your supplements over to any type of metal, jewelry. A lot of people in the Telegram use this through like tinfoil, and then they can carry that piece of tinfoil around and it's absorbed to the frequencies. So just want to bring that up too.
An MD friend of mine has a whole collection of tinfoil that he's created from your products. I want to talk now a little bit about some of the frequency cards. I have 4 of them so far. I think there's about 35, some for humans, some for pets. So if we're thinking about our listener audience being more complex chronic conditions, which of the frequency cards are you most drawn to that maybe are most relevant for us to talk? Wondering if you can highlight a few favorites. And then do most people feel something from the cards, or is it more subtle? How many hours a day should we be carrying them? Can we use multiple cards at the same time?
Yeah, I keep mine depending on which ones they are. I've got resurrection here. I have abundance. So I keep them all around just in my office. And then I keep quite a few of them because they're the size of credit cards, of course. So I use them in my wallet. And I feel like if you're actively trying to like heal something, I would keep them on you as long as you can, because there's also really not much of a too much thing. I see when I, especially at conferences, there are people that are so drawn to certain cards and they just like to grab them and hold them on their chest. It's really an interesting thing to see because they're like, I love the way this feels. I love the way the vibration is on me. So I would per se that like that's not something I feel. Like I don't put it up to me and then just feel the vibration. My wife for sure can feel it. She's way more on this energetic like sensitivity than I am, and I see it a lot with people at conferences when they feel it. So you're right. We have probably like 40 different types, and that's another place where I would get like you can get the Heal 360 card for that. Gosh, man, universal power would be a great one. For men and women's, we do have men's booster and women's booster. And that's kind of geared though towards people that are more like over 40-ish, because it's like for nail, skin, hair, and bone health, and then specific gender like hormones and stuff, Our cell rebalance one would be really good. I think that we used to have that called like the DNA protector one.
That's the one I have in my pocket.
Yeah. So like, we also have if I remember, we should have a detox support card. So those are ones too that could assist someone and help them. We have skeletal and fascial optimization. I would say really the Heal 360 is probably the best one for like actually healing and making yourself feel better.
So I saw there was also a water frequency card, and it wasn't really clear if that was to be worn on the body to assist us in using consumed water to hydrate more efficiently, or if that card then was intended to charge water outside of the body before you drink it.
Yeah, that one is meant to be like actually put it with the water, not with us. There are ways, I think, if we really wanted to stretch that, we could say how like if you have it near you, it's going to kind of structure the water that's already in you, because at a molecular level, we are 99% water. So I could see some benefits to that. But really what that's there for is to actually have next to the water, similar to our water bottles, because those are the type of things that will do. Like it's actually with the water that's in it, it's adding those frequencies.
So since we're talking then about water and you mentioned the water bottles, I know there's a Leela Quantum water bottle. I do charge my water in the super block, but for someone who maybe doesn't have a block yet, is the bottle charging the water with the same basic quantum energy? What's different about the water before and after it's charged? Does charging that water then lead to better absorption of the water, better cellular hydration? We touched on that a bit earlier. And then as I understand, there's a couple of there's a Heal 360 water bottle, and then there's a Leela Quantum Energy water bottle. So how do we decide between those two water bottles?
So they're just the different frequencies. So the two different bottles is like, I believe it's the 360 frequencies on that. And so the stainless steel one is our newer one. And then the bamboo one is kind of going to be the other frequencies on it. But it's a little different than putting it just under your block. Now, you are getting the exposure of the quantum energy. So you're going to see like the results of the before and after, like with the Emoto studies. But the significant difference is really what frequencies are being imprinted into that. So if you have a block, this is other cool stuff you can do. Like we said, we kind of transfer the frequencies. So like what I would do with my water is you can transfer frequencies into the water. So similar as you would with your capsule, if you really wanted to customize your own frequencies into the water, you can do that with a block. So I'd be putting the water under the block, and then put whatever, if you want vitamins or something, any of that type of stuff, a card of abundance, you can transfer all of that. But the actual benefits from what we're seeing on like the actual studies is just strictly from the quantum energy, not so much the added frequencies, not so much, not at all from the frequencies that are added.
So let's then talk a little more about the blocks. So you have a whole series of blocks: the quantum block, the infinity, the grand block, the travel block, the super block, probably some others that are coming soon too as well. So what are some of the best applications of these blocks, other than obviously them mitigating the environmental influences that might be health negating, like EMFs and so on? Not all, but I put some of my food in there. I put my water in there. I put my supplements. I put family photos and individually because of the whole quantum entanglement and all of that stuff. But talk to us a little bit about what are some of the other applications of the blocks, and what are people then seeing when they are charging their food, their water, their supplements? What are some of the other things that we can do with these blocks?
This is where I really rely on the Telegram group again, because this is where people like the hive mindset comes, and you can see how people are using it. Some people are really lucky enough to have physically small enough to have like heads that can fit in the block. So if you have like a infinity block, you can stick your head under there. You can put body parts under there, especially if you have an injury. We have quite a few posts on our social media from like professional athletes that like broke an arm. We have two guys, again, this is not hard science. We have two guys that broke their legs, and one of them had a block, and he laid under the block for like 45 minutes each day. And he recovered, they told him 6 months, and he recovered in 2 months, compared to the guy who didn't have it, who actually went 7 months without recovering. So again, that goes into speeding up the healing. And ways that you can integrate that is putting your body parts under the block. So if you have an acute injury, put that under the block. I know when Leela, who it's actually named after, so Philip and Cruz's son, he was a motocross racer, and he fell and he basically broke both wrists. As soon as they're at the ER, they've got his hands under the block, like in real life experience, he's in the ER and they bring the block so he can have his wrists under there, So, I mean, really there's anything your imagination can come up with. I have a gram block up in the house. So basically anything that comes through my house food wise, my wife puts in the gram block. You can put 2 like whole food shopping bags at a time through there. I mean, there's businesses that use it for like, they'll sell oils, and they can imprint frequencies and infuse frequencies in there. So we have on a commercial level how people are using it, and places like Sun Life Organics, which is kind of like a super bougie smoothie and acai bowl. You pay like $55 for an acai bowl. They're kind of like the Erewhon of smoothies and acai bowls, and they're all down like the south side. There's a few in New York, mostly in Southern California, and then Texas and Florida. But they have blocks in every one of their locations, and before they hand any of the customers the drinks and smoothies and acai bowls, they put them in the block. Now, the reason that's working is because your fruit, of course, has water in it, and when you're structuring the water that's in that fruit, it's going to also enhance the flavors. So there really is so many things you can do. You can be putting, like I said, food in there. You can be putting alcohol under there. My wife, we don't drink much, but we do live in wine country. So if we definitely drink If we definitely put a whole bottle under the block and just see if it can harmonize anything, any form of alcohol, any type of cake, anything that we're going to enjoy like that. We just put everything under the block. Jewelry, you can put anything under there. Clothes.
What have you observed with, let's say, taking a cell phone that maybe is stressing a person? Maybe you can muscle test and see that that's stressful for that particular person, charging the cell phone in the block and then retesting to see if that item is either no longer stressing the person, or my observation was that same cell phone now actually seemed to be beneficial to the person after it was charged in the block.
Yeah, Philip, I don't have like a measurement to test any of that stuff, but Philip always talks about, because now if you put metal or anything under the block, it's charged pretty much forever. But if you have something that's actively providing EMF, so like a watch, earbuds, or a cell phone, he says to put those and recharge them every like 4 weeks, and that it will be again, it's taking something that's harmful and can actually make it beneficial for you. So like your body responds better to it. But I've never measured anything myself. And I'm not really, like I said, I'm able to have AirPods or watch and not be truly affected as if I am in downtown Austin or downtown Washington, DC, where I do feel the EMFs physically through my throat tightens up. And so I'm not that sensitive to cell phones to have any like anecdotal experiences with that.
In our last section together, I want to talk about some of the services that Leela provides. So you have the Trom Easy, you have the Quantum Upgrade. Many people with complex chronic health challenges, there is a background, not always, but the majority of the time, there is an emotional trauma or conflict background, or the illness itself becomes so traumatic that now you have PTSD just from being gaslit by the medical community and all the challenges of losing your friends and family and not being believed and all of that. So I know that tools in kind of that trauma release realm are really of interest and important. I know you all have the Trom Easy app that's kind of a process to transform internal and external impacts on our well-being from the influence of traumas and conflicts. So wondering if you can just tell us a little about that. And then my understanding is that this one is a little different, where it's not so much the quantum entanglement concept, but that it is actually an app running on the phone, and anyone that then is in the field of that phone device potentially is benefiting from it.
Yeah, the Trom Easy is probably our newest thing that we have. And honestly, we don't promote it enough. It's almost more like a smaller circle of people that are aware of it. And, it's basically creating and putting out frequencies actively from your phone to help release traumas. And I can just tell you a story. My wife is, from my own experience, the worst flyer. Like, she has so much fear. She goes into panic attacks. She'll cry hysterically. She's shaking when on a plane. She cannot handle it. And nothing that we're aware of has ever happened. She just has this insane fear that beyond anything I've ever seen someone, where we circumnavigated the country 12 times, I think, around during COVID, because we drove everywhere. She wouldn't fly. So when we do have to fly, it is crazy intense. And one time Philip's like, well, why don't you use Trom Easy? And I was like, nothing's going to help this. I promise you. Like, it is so intense. She should be drugged up, honestly, because she just can't. It can almost probably get us kicked off a plane, because she is so verbally scared and shivering and hysterically crying. And so she was the first person to do the Trom Easy. And it was the first flight of her life that she was like, at least content. She didn't cry. Wasn't hyperventilating, and she wasn't like verbally hysterical like she normally would be. And it was like oh my gosh, because that is not anything, even though it's anecdotal, there's nothing about that could be placebo, because even when she would do Xanax or something, like, it still wasn't stopping her. And this was like the first smooth flight, and she actually hasn't had much of an issue with flying since. She's flown 3 times, and we're about to fly again, and she just does the Trom Easy before. So it's really cool. It's something we don't talk about enough in terms of like the Leela Q stuff, but I think it's also much more of a different type of demographic who would utilize it. But I believe it's just supporting it.
So there's a couple other features of Trom Easy that the way I'm thinking about them, hopefully they'll eventually move to Quantum Upgrade, but there's some apps within the app. So the Amazing Travel, the Vax Harmonizer, I understand there's a Chemtrail Harmonizer. Someone also mentioned that there's an eye support app in there as well. So, I mean, these sound like, I mean, if we're talking about Vax harmonizing and chemtrail, if you believe in those things harmonizing, those sound pretty significant. I know one of my brightest and smartest colleagues that really values those programs. So, wondering what you're seeing with those additional programs that are part of TromEasy.
Yeah, I've really relied on again, so I keep talking about the Telegram group, but that's where I get a lot of my information in terms of how people are utilizing the products, because that's the best way to go. But definitely the chemtrail one has been probably the most popular as well. And people just, again, I don't have personal experience with it. I mean, lucky where I live, we don't really have that much. Now, when I lived in the East Bay and we had all the refineries, that's a whole nother story to deal with. But up here, it's not something I utilize. But what we're seeing, all of this stuff with Trauma Easy has been anecdotal. But again, we see a lot of benefits from it, and we're seeing people talk about how like it's not messing up with them having the headaches, the actual responses that they might normally get if they're outside with a bunch of chemtrails. They're not experiencing that.
So maybe I'll just put this manifest this request through you to the Leela team. That sounds like a beautiful thing to add to Quantum Upgrade so that people can just have one service that they're using and then use that harmonization from Quantum Upgrade as well. I may have heard that maybe that's in the future plan as well.
I will text Philip. That'll be the first thing I text him when we end this, because I agree. But again, those are things I don't know why. If it was a test to see like if it was working first that way, or that was maybe it needed to be something more strong than just through quantum entanglement or something. I'm not sure. Maybe it has to be through an actual physical device that it's putting it out. There's always very specific reasons Philip does things like that. So there could be I'm sure he's already thought about it, and I will find out for you, Scott, but I'm sure for him, it's always a justified reason.
So as our last topic, I want to touch on quantum upgrade. So I think this is another area where people are going to initially be skeptical. I think a lot of the research that we talked about kind of covers this as well, but there is specific research that you all have done on quantum upgrade on the website. I think there's more than 20 research papers. Many were placebo controlled as well. So let's just talk a little bit about the difference. Then we talked about Trom Easy coming through your phone. Quantum upgrade is really using an identifier of some object, like maybe your photo or maybe your SIM card number or whatever. I don't know exactly, IMEI number or whatever it is. So something that's essentially like the IP address of the object. And then that is being introduced into the field of quantum upgrade. And the benefits then on the person, as I understand with quantum upgrade, are from the quantum entanglement principle. It's not so much that quantum upgrade is transmitting some scalar thing to you across the thousands of miles or whatnot. So wondering if my understanding of quantum upgrade is correct, that it is based on quantum entanglement, and then wondering if you can talk about the objects like person, car, so on, that we can essentially target within that service.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much everything you said is pretty spot on with that. It's, each subscription that we have, so you can do like pets, you can do your property, which side note, the property is based off of Google Maps. So if you're in a house, it's going to be the whole property, your front backyard, whatever it is on Google Maps. But like sorry to go back, we have field for you, we have car, we have business too. So like each subscription, it just requires like a unique identifier. So like it's actually your phone number, your car's like your VIN. For like yourself as a person, you're going to need like your birthplace, your birth date, and your legal name that you go by. And then, property, of course, you just need your physical address on that. So, but yes, it's quantum entanglement. Now, I think for a lot of people, it's easier to grasp it if we call it a digital service, but it is actually an analog mechanical technology. So we're not zapping you with anything. We're not sending transmissions. You don't have to be around any form of an internet connection, Wi-Fi, nothing. It's basically gaining you access to the quantum field. and however we have that identifier. So to be clear, you can set things up and customize it however you want through a digital platform, like a website. Click on there, you can customize everything. But you do not have to have a cell phone with you. You do not have to have, like, once it's set up, you are gained access to it and it's there regardless if you're in the middle of nowhere on an airplane. That doesn't matter because again, that part is analog / mechanical, but sometimes it's easier just to say it's a digital service just from the front base because quantum entanglement, like we mentioned before, it's a very interesting. Wow. Kind of how do you grasp it? Which again, with a lot of these things, the ball is in our court to do these studies so people can see that even if you don't feel it, even if you can't see it with your own eyes, here are the benefits that you're seeing regardless.
So in Quantum Upgrade, you have whatever the target is or the object is that will be entangled in the Quantum Upgrade service. And then there's a number of different packages or frequency bundles like abundance, heal, source, booster bundle, and there's animal frequencies there as well. If you go to the Quantum Upgrade website, there's a lot of detail that explains them, but I just kind of want to touch on each one just very quickly and see which ones for you are kind of the standout. So if we think about the abundance bundle that has things like abundance, prosperity, those I think were two of the cards that you had there as well. Gratitude, heart chakra, self-love, and partnership. You mentioned the importance of that. I think when we were talking about HRV, also unity and flow. What stands out for you in the abundance bundle?
The big shift in my life is this like gratitude and abundance. Honestly, like those are, I think at the end of the day though, like we could have a whole conversation on all this, but like self-love is the most important because just self-love is your ceiling for the rest of your life, like in terms of not your whole life in terms of years, but like what you do outward. So ever how much you love yourself is the limit of what you can do outside for the community, to your family, like that ceiling. So you need to love, the more you love yourself, the more you are able to give and be and do externally. And I think that's really an important place to start. And then beyond that, if you move up to like with an abundance, gratitude is what do they say is like the antidote to fear. It's like what that does for us, being in a place of gratitude. So I think those are all really important, all of them. But I'd say if I start with, I tend to use gratitude, especially for like meditation. Like that's where I see myself, like where I really connect with it more is the gratitude with that bundle.
Then you have the Heal bundle, which has the Heal and Heal 360 frequency, inner peace, weight management, that nutritional bio-base, cell rebalance, soul comeback, pain reconciliation, young forever, calm and rest, brain support, skeletal and fascial optimization, spectrum and world champion, lots of things there. I was curious about the skeletal. That's a big one. I was curious about the skeletal and fascial optimization frequency, mainly because so many people that I talk with and work with these days are dealing with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome that we mentioned earlier and different connective tissue disorders. So what is that frequency intended for? Is that meant for this population of connective tissue disorders, hypermobilities, those kinds of things?
Well, they will benefit from it. Another thing, honestly, is just recovery. If you have a strained neck, a bad back, or any type of like joint issue like that, it can significantly help. It would definitely support them for that. But also people, like I said, if you have a tweaked back or something, that would be what you'd go to.
This particular bundle also has a spectrum frequency. So is that intended for kids or even adults on the spectrum, like autism, ADHD, ADD? What is that one aimed at?
Yeah, it's going to support them, especially with the brain wavelengths. I think it's also going to balance in with the brain hemispheres communication as well as supporting for it, but also the brain wavelength balancing can be really helpful for them.
Then we have the source frequency bundle that has primal source, happiness, focus, protection. That sounds nice. Olympic performance, pineal gland activation, and universal power frequencies. So wondering if you can talk to us just a second or two on the protection and pineal gland activation or any others in that bundle that you would like to highlight.
Yeah, the protection one's really interesting because honestly, it's for like heavy energies on your property and how I would utilize it was like multidimensional protection. So any type of low vibration, whether it's energies.
What some might call energetic parasites.
Yes.
Ah.
Yeah. So I always set that up. I honestly have that usually on my property at nighttime. I always have that one set up on there. The pineal gland, helps decalcify it. I use that one also for meditation, especially with Joe Dispenza stuff. I like to do that one and kind of support them and supplement them together. One thing is really cool is the primal source. So like the source one it's really cool because it's kind of also based off of 5-MeO DMT. So Bufo, bringing us back to source, bringing us all back to oneness and connectivity. It's a very beautiful one.
There's then the booster bundle that has those men's and women's booster that we talked about earlier, testosterone, seasonal support, exertion response, and micro harmony. And then there's also an animal frequency bundle with things like calm, as well as the heal frequencies for dogs, cats, or horses. There's a race horse support frequency. And I have to think that's actually fairly popular because I know people love to biohack their $1 million race horses. So is that something, do you actually see that community working with the Leela technologies?
Yeah, that was created because of the demand of it. And it's really cool because if people want to see what's working, go look and see what people do with their racehorses because they're using PEMF on them. They're using a lot of performance enhancements on horses because of the amount of money that's in that. They will invest a lot of money. So it's really cool to see that. But the horses became a very popular one. And there's some very elite race horses that are utilizing that one.
So is it, when we're talking about mitigating the effects of environmental EMFs, are all of the frequencies that you could run within Quantum Upgrade also having that protective effect from EMFs, or are there specific ones that you have to select to get that EMF mitigating effect?
So as long as you have the quantum upgrade on you, you are always have access to the quantum energy. So I wouldn't focus. We do have an EMF one, and I think it's just a hyper focus on it. But like when you have quantum upgrade, I would focus more on the frequencies that you're wanting in your life in that moment, whether it's abundance, gratitude, because the EMF protection is there regardless. That's coming just as a baseline from the quantum energy that is also part of the quantum entanglement.
One of the things that I think is really uncommon about how you all work with the Quantum Upgrade is that you have normally a 7-day free trial. You're actually offering a 15-day free trial for listeners of this conversation. I'll put that in the show notes. But you all don't even ask for a credit card to start the trial. And so I'm interpreting that to mean that most people that use Quantum Upgrade continue with it after the trial period. What's been your experience?
Yeah, we have a low churn rate, they'd call it. So like people that just drop off, because it's understandable, especially as a customer, like a few things. For me as a customer of many other products, like I love the idea of having to be able to try something and not put in a credit card information and have to like remember in the back of my head if I want to keep it or not, because if not, they're going to charge me the day before and then deal with all that. So we do no credit card, you get it. And it's one of those things because it's really important, and because a lot of people, even though we can show you all the studies, like most people want to feel it. And as a side note, I always will tell people, like, especially with the quantum upgrade, if you're someone who has to feel it, we don't really recommend this, but again, if you're, I understand that part, if you have that lifestyle, because I'm that way, is when you test it, first off, join the Telegram group, ask the questions on there, or you can reach out to us through like social media or email. But like you may want to, you can customize the intensity. And during your trial, I would recommend at some point, if you feel you need to feel that, feel it, I would increase it to the max for a little bit, but I would not keep it there because then you will detox. You'll have headaches. You want to drink more water when you start quantum upgrade because we talk about the detox effects. And this is like having access to it at all times to drink more water, but you can up the intensity, but I would be very mindful and not do it for too long because it can overstimulate your nervous system too. And then it's not a good effect. And you obviously, this is all meant for you to feel good.
Are there any contraindications, anyone who should not be using quantum energy, whether it's your physical products or any of the services, if we're thinking about pregnancy or people with pacemakers or any contraindications, and then any incompatible interventions, meaning if we're doing other types of supplements or treatments or anything where maybe quantum energy is not going to mix well with other things we might be doing?
So a few things that we have found. One really cool thing is your body only accepts what it needs. So none of this is forceful. Same thing with gratitude and abundance. Like it doesn't throw it into you. It's not like you're absorbing it, but it's always access, and our bodies are smart. It knows what it needs. So it's not going to access or take anything that it isn't going to help it. So we have yet to, and I know Philip would say there's nothing that would be incompatible because it's not forcing, it's passive with all of this. One thing that we do see is like for pregnant women and even just like newborn babies and stuff and children, like they actually in a way they can feel and have more benefits. Like they benefit from the quantum energy even over us, which is pretty cool.
So with everything that we covered today, which is a lot, if someone is interested in getting into quantum energy, where would you suggest they start? And then what might they layer in later? Should we start with the Heal 360 capsule? Should we start with quantum upgrade? Give us a kind of quantum energy journey for people introducing Leela into their life.
Now that we have the quantum upgrade, I think it's a no-brainer to start there because it's instant. Like you can have a setup in 5 minutes to get it going. So I would set up the quantum upgrade, free trial, no credit card, get that going. And for like the tangible products, I always recommend the Heal 360 capsule because I understand that everything is a larger investment. So you want to start and be able to feel it and feel comfortable. Again, even if you don't feel things, we can show endless amounts of times that you're still getting the benefits. But if you want to be able to feel it, it's instead of going out and investing, $1,800 right away, you can get the capsule at $145 and wear that for a while and get the benefits and feel it and get just experience from it and then move upward. But we just have so many different products. Again, from the frequency cards, we have different types of jewelry, we have wristbands that aren't really charged with certain things, but then we have the water bottles, we have clothing, dog bowls and dog food containers. We have coasters. So, we've got really cool coasters and you put your drink on that too and charge it. So I would say the best thing to start out is the Heal capsule from Leela Quantum but of course the quantum upgrade, because that can become up right away.
So we'll have some links in the show notes. The Leela team is offering a 10% discount off of a first purchase. So we'll have links for Leela Quantum, for Traum Easy, for Quantum Upgrade as well. My last question is the same for every guest, and that is, what are some of the key things that you do on a daily basis in support of your own health?
Kind of a non-negotiable for me is sunrise. I've been doing that for probably, 7 years after, especially after the circadian code and the Nobel Prize was awarded on that. And I think the importance of setting ourselves up for success, watching sunrise and what that does for our body, that's very important to me. It sets me up for the whole day. And I wake up at 4:30 pretty much naturally and wide awake. I don't need coffee or anything. And it sets me up for the day. Watch sunrise, do what I need to do. I do my meditations. But one of the most impactful things for me is definitely just focusing on the breath. I think it is, the breath is the remote to the brain. So exactly how we breathe tells the rest of our body exactly how to respond. So if you want to have more control over yourself throughout the day, your emotions, your responses, all that, like really, I focus on my breath and it allows me to be much more calm, and this isn't always a part, but it's like, I really focus on nasal breathing. And again, there's caveats. Even if I'm working out, if I'm running, I'm nasal breathing. And there are definitely times where to the point where if I breathe through my mouth, it kind of hurts. But like what it really does to my body keeps me I feel like I'm in a parasympathetic mode like all day. And I would put that mostly to my breath and being mindful of how I'm breathing.
Yeah, I love that. part of the reason that I mouth tape at night too, so that I'm breathing through my nose while I'm sleeping. But such a great conversation. I learned a lot from this discussion. I think listeners will really enjoy it as well, and hopefully be able to apply some of these concepts and quantum energy into their lives and hopefully improve their health along the way. So Todd, thank you so much for being super generous with your time and for all that you do. I look forward to more dialogue and collaboration, and just appreciate that you're out there. And thank you so much.
Yeah, Scott, you ask amazing questions. I just want to give that to you as well. I do a lot of podcasts, and today was probably one of the more in-depth and most appreciating podcasts I've been on. So I really appreciate that. And I'm sure your listeners understand that too when they listen to another podcast and listen to yours. You don't ask just the superficial questions. And I really appreciate that. So thank you.
To learn more about today's guest and the quantum energy tools discussed in this episode, see the links in the show notes. There you'll find the links and discount codes available for Leela Quantum Tech, Trom EZ, and Quantum Upgrade. Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. If you're enjoying the podcast, please leave a positive rating or review, as doing so will help the show reach a broader audience. To support the show, visit betterhealthguy.com/donate. To get my newsletter, visit betterhealthguy.com/newsletters. To follow me on Facebook, Instagram, X, or TikTok, you can find me there as Better Health Guy. This and other episodes can be found on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, YouTube, and Odyssey.
Thanks for listening to this Better Health Guy blogcast with Scott, your Better Health Guy. To check out additional shows and learn more about Scott's personal journey to better health, please visit betterhealthguy.com.